Our guest today is the founder of Griffin Product and Growth. She's also an accomplished speaker and startup advisor. Auntie Griffin, welcome to the show.
It's such a pleasure to be here. And also, I've talked to Michael a number of times on Twitter. So finally, it's great to actually get to talk to him more and be on the podcast.
Cool.
I'm not a bot, right?
So he's not just a bot, which is amazing. Great to also meet you, Jason.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Well, let's get it started, hopefully with something that kind of comes naturally to you here. Where do you even start when you're creating a company's AI roadmap, especially considering the security misgivings many vendors hold today regarding where data travels, how it's stored, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, the heart of it really begins with what is the overall product strategy. And, I say, hey, I work on AI product strategy. And a lot of that is how do we even just think about what does that product strategy translate to in the world of AI, not creating an entirely separate strategy. And I think it really starts there because every company's tolerance for privacy, security, all these other things, it's really going to also depend on what their DNA as a company. And then also there's going to be certain decisions you're going to have to make in terms of what the AI does, how it works, those sort of things that are going to be based on ultimately who is your product serving? What ultimately differentiates you? What also, I think from a data standpoint, one of the things is we talk about garbage in, garbage out. It's the same thing also with differentiation and differentiation out. So if you don't have differentiated data, which most people don't, and that's okay, that's going to be different than if you have highly proprietary data. And some of the decisions you're going to make that may impact from a technical architecture standpoint or from just a user standpoint. And so really the heart of it starts with what is your product strategy and then working backwards from there.
Right. So you've hit on one of my pet peeves. So people often in corporates especially, but it's more widespread, tech startups make the same mistake over and over, is you create a product that's divorced from your company strategy or your business model strategy. Mm-hmm. So the question is often, what makes a good business model? What makes a good company strategy? And if you go back to the definition from Michael Porter, essentially the art of strategy is being different. So yes. When you think about that, because you mentioned differentiation, I think that is absolutely the heart. How do you help teams connect the product? Because often that product person may not be a senior exec. Mm-hmm. Right? They might be a director, manager, whatever. Mm-hmm. How do you guarantee that that product is aligned with the broader company strategy? How do you think through that with them?
I mean, I think some of it is really, number one, making sure does that person actually understand what strategy is? And even if they don't, there's ways to kind of abstract all the Michael Porter language into things that people can understand. Yeah. And then help them connect of yes, what are the business goals, but also how does the company choose to get to those goals? And what do they have an advantage in? What are they particularly good at? What are their specific weaknesses? And then where should they be? Also looking at where are they positioned in this market and what is everybody else doing right now? Because the last thing I want to do is say, oh, well, all those other people are doing AI this way. I should copy that feature for feature. And there might be some overlap, but there's going to be a lot of area where you realize, well, if everybody's doing that, now I'm just fighting for everybody everyone neck and neck with my product and helping them understand there may be going to be some overlap because you guys are in the same industry, but there's also going to be areas where you decide to do features a little differently, or you decide not to do certain features and focus on others.
Exactly.
Because you need to really understand where are you investing and why, because the whole goal is not just to build a thing and not to build a thing that meets the bar of everyone else in the industry. The goal is to build a thing that ultimately can win in the market. And it's really hard to win in the market if you're always neck and neck with 20 or 200 other competitors.
And that leads directly to a price war, right? If you're just copying, that's operational efficiency, right? It's not strategically differentiating. And I think one of the hard parts there is the whole heart of strategy is saying what you won't do. And
Yeah.
AI actually makes that harder because you can literally try everything, right? You can try
Yes.
every feature. You can ship it in a few minutes in some cases, right? Within a day or within a week.
Yeah.
The other problem is with product people, you've honed in on that word thing. And this is one of the hardest things I've seen in innovation is how do you get people detached from the thing to
Yeah.
focus on the problem and the customer job? How do you work with people to do that? Because that is very difficult for people. They're so attached to their thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's two parts, and one is you can't make people do anything they really don't want to do. But for the people who are open to the idea, there's more than just making it exist. Just helping them see there are a lot of things that exist.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that they are doing well, that they're succeeding. There are a lot of businesses that are frankly,
Zombies.
struggling. Yeah, zombies. They're just like, they're kind of there. They're kind of just barely making it. And also just look at the number of companies out there right now, which, they're claiming it's AI. And I'm sure there are some that are reorganizing because of AI, but there's a lot of AI washing where the number of companies that are strictly, every quarter doing layoffs. If your business is doing that well, you don't do layoffs every quarter. And so there's a thing of like you can make the thing exist. That doesn't necessarily mean the business is healthy. And I think there is this idea of I can just make a thing exist, and it's for those business people to figure out the business side. And I think what everybody needs to understand, if you are in this type of work and tech, like you are, I would argue everyone is actually the business person. And I think the one thing that AI is changing in terms of how people work is not even an AI principle at all. It's actually forcing people to think about what is my goal and how does that connect to making the company succeed, not just what are my tasks and do I do the tasks and check them off because that's what my company told me to do. And I think that is actually like a very hard transition for a lot of people because, I do think AI is making things more competitive, but not always in the ways that people are shouting about on Twitter.
Yeah. Twitter is not a good place to get like a really grounded, fundamental take, right? It's usually
Yeah.
it's psychosis to one direction or the other. But you hit another sore point. You're doing a good job of hitting our sore points is the AI washing. And part of the biggest problem, I think, right now is the incentives that CEOs have. So they have this incentive through the annual targets to juice the EBIT. And as long as you have that, it's very hard to think about product strategy,
Mhm.
long-term roadmap with AI. What can it really do to transform our
Yeah.
business, right? So I don't know how we get around that. That is a very difficult topic in general. Jason, what's up next?
Yeah, we kind of touched on it there, but is there a surefire way to tell if someone's pitching you AI slop versus a solid AI product? What's your take there?
I think the time tested phrase, if it's too good, sounds too good to be true, it's probably not real. There are certain products that I absolutely love in AI, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this exists.
Yeah.
But there's still things where I'm like, okay, I understand how, and even before I use it, I understand in theory how that would work. It's not question mark, question mark, question mark, end goal, right? And so there's a lot of things where they say, hey, we're promising you these things, but where AI is today, it's an amplifier. So again, if it can amplify your garbage and it can amplify your most brilliant thought. And I think that's the thing of like, is this a genuine product? Can somebody actually explain to you how this works? And does also, I think the other thing that I'm starting to think of more is how this person is selling this product to you. Does that add up? Because one of the things I've seen is there was one time where I talked to this company where they were selling this idea of AI that was making these cold calls because they can find your audience. It's used agents to find your audience. The AIs can do a cold call or also like a video if you want. And the concept is kind of cool. And they claim that, they're making all this progress. But how I came to talk to them was somebody who is basically works as a connector. And if, you end up doing business with the company that
Just
they introduce you to, they get
kickback.
they get a cut. Yeah. And I was like, okay, that's very, because I was just like, oh, I've never met one of those people before. And they were like, I didn't do business with them, but I had talked to them and they're like, well, can I introduce you to this company? And I was like, um,
Those are the
sure.
middle people, right?
Yeah. And I was just like, more so I was curious because I was like, I don't know, maybe they might need like, product management, product strategy. But then it was interesting because then it became clear. I'm like, oh, I'm on a sales call. And it was really fascinating because I was thinking to myself, I was like, but if this thing is actually as good as you say it is, why didn't this find me? Or versus I'm like, and I'm not just like, why didn't this find me specifically? Because I'm just one data point. It's not going to find everything. But why are you working with somebody who needs to take a cut if the AI is good as you claim it is? And so there's a lot of things of like, does this sound too good to be true? I think the other layer is also, is this how humans work? Because there's certain things where, as much as humans say they love AI, everyone's complaining about AI writing. People say, oh, I wouldn't want to do, an AI sales call where I can't talk to an actual person.
Yeah.
And then that layer of like, is how this is being sold to me make any sense for what they promise?
Yeah, part of that is AI itself is kind of a black box, right? The way, particularly LLMs, does
Yeah.
anyone really understand how they work? Like, we kind of understand at scale how they're working, but we don't understand how it goes from X to Y. And Jason can tell you, we get these emails from people, middle people. They're not
Yeah.
people. Middle agents is what you want to call them, right? They're
Middle
not even people
agents.
anymore, right? They're reaching out to us, trying to connect. It's like they're like the channel people who try to connect you with an author who wants to be on a show or whatever. But very
Yeah.
interesting, right? It is difficult to say where this is all heading and what humans will
Yeah.
accept. I mean, we're still not even mature enough to handle social media, right?
I mean, I think most people are not very mature enough to handle social media. Though the thing I think about, the thing that annoys me about what you said, like the middle agents, is not that they're agents. It's that you have a thing that has way more time than humans to go in, research a person, come
Yeah,
up with a very thoughtful, very specific thing of this is what I want, this is how it ties into what you do. Here is a really specific detail, and bam, right? I'd be like, if a human wrote me that, I'd be like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And what we're getting instead is I'm like, this is just equally as bad as the people that just say, "Hey, I saw on LinkedIn we both breathe air. Let's connect." And I'm
yes,
like, I can't believe you're paying an AI to do that. And I'm like, I understand for some people it's a numbers game, but I also think that now it's so saturated that it's actually probably hurt that channel
that's right.
significantly. And if somebody's reaching out and even if they're not using AI, if they're not putting enough effort into their message, it's actually even hurt the response rates for that type of message, even if a human did write it. And I think a lot about that because people used to say like, oh, texting is a good channel because you get like a really good open rate, a really good reply rate. But then again, you started getting all these, ads and other things, and politics kind of
Crypto.
saturated it. Oh, yeah. I mean, fortunately, I think my Apple stuff is set up where it's like I don't get a lot of those spam messages anymore, but that became a channel where I'm like, I'm sure that is oversaturated, but now things like LinkedIn are so oversaturated. Even some of my Twitter DMs is just like my other inbox is just people, I'll just say saying like things where I'm like, what does this have anything to do with me? And I'm like for an agent, and maybe people just don't want to pay the agent fees. Then I'm like, then why do this at all? I'll just like have it research the person, man, and then be like, come up
Yeah.
with a really thoughtful way of how this is connected to anything whatsoever.
Yeah, I think that's the key point you brought up with differentiation. How do you differentiate in a world where it's saturated, right?
Yeah.
And agents are going to make that worse, right? Because
Yeah.
And those are different markets, though. I'd argue that's a commodity market. If you're in that market, you're commoditized already, right?
Yeah.
Out of the
Yeah.
gates, it's a volume game, right? Jason, what
Yeah.
else we got?
Yeah. So there's been a case made that frontier models will be so capable that most software companies will eventually be replaced in what it has been called the SaaS apocalypse. What's your thought on the LLM platforms going vertical?
Well, I will just say, I think in the next couple of years, I'm not particularly worried. I think they will get better and better. So I can't say what's going to happen 20 years from now. But I will say, I don't know if anyone here has ever tried to make their own kind of like AI tool
Yeah.
workflow. I've done it and it was quite delightful until it broke. And then I was just like, well, I don't want to spend my Saturday when it's one of the few nice days in New York in the spring, inside fixing this. And there are people who will and people who have their reasons why they're inside all the time. But I'm like, I want to go do other things than sitting inside for it's not even like okay, I gotta go do the dishes and I know how long it takes me to do the dishes and then I have a dishwasher, so there's a point at which a machine is actually going to properly take over. But one of the things, and you've seen this in studies where they say like kind of, yeah, the more AI you use, the more you end up actually also working. Part of it is like, I think people get dopamine hits of like, oh, has done more. But also, I don't want to maintain my own software. There was a period of time where I was like, oh, I can make software that's going to be able to check my calendar and see, oh, do I have anything double booked? Do I not have enough travel time on such and such a day? All this other stuff. And what I came to the conclusion of is like, I don't want to spend my time actually building it. I'm like, I don't want to create my software for my entire life and then also be the one who's responsible for fixing it. Because I always have another idea, and then I'm like, oh wait, but it's cool for a while, and yes, I still tinker, but there's a point at which you're like, okay, yeah, like I want to actually go outside. I want to meet with real people. I want to like enjoy life, and then also again when it breaks. And I think there's that part of if you have something where it's that easy for Claude to just automate without having to actually build anything, then you're in danger. If you have something where people will be really annoyed, like I use this
Yeah.
and I tweet about them a lot. I don't have a relationship with them. I just really love them. Is Howie AI. I use it for scheduling because I can just add this bot to my emails and then automatically like acts like I tell people it's an AI, but acts like a human and helps schedule. And yeah, I'm kind of obsessed with Howie, but the thing is, I'm like, I don't want to maintain that myself. And the second that like if I maintain it, hey, I try to email Howie and say set up this time with like Michael and Jason or something, and it doesn't work, and then I'm like, oh, like now I'm going in and I'm going through all the things I hate about scheduling. I'm like, I'm gonna be really annoyed. I don't, and I'm like, also, I'm like, I don't have time to fix that. I don't want to do that.
Well, Howie might say those two guys aren't worth your time, right? So I think people who say that think that SaaS is dead or that the generalized models are going to take over everything are naive. They don't actually understand vertical workflows.
I
They
would
don't
agree with
understand the
that.
human aspect of it, right? Like in corporate, I would say 90% of your job is just dealing with people. It has nothing to do with an Excel or anything, right?
I think they don't understand people. And then I will also say, I think they don't understand the the foundations of it from a data perspective.
Yes.
Because yes, Claude can do certain things. And also it has to connect to all the right data. And then when you realize that a lot of these companies, one of the favors that they're doing for you is that they are actually maintaining a lot of this data that you need in a way that you never have to think about it or worry about it. And I think people think like, oh yeah, I can do an Airtable. I'm like, no, there's specific things where I'm like, you just
Yeah.
don't want to be the person who maintains that database or like any of the maintenance around it or that kind of thing. And you can say, oh, agents are just going to work with it. And then why is that company valuable? And I'm like, because I'll just say from what I've seen, the agents are not just solo maintaining databases without
No.
anybody who's an expert on like backend or databases whatsoever. And so my whole thing is I'm like, even if they just become glorified databases, that's a glorified database I don't want to maintain.
Well, my friends at Berkeley, we used to work on ventures. They called that plumbing, right? Nobody wants to
Yeah.
do the plumbing.
No.
And anybody who's ever worked in a massive corporate,
Yeah.
there is data. You just can't find it. You can't
Hmm.
access it. You
Yep.
have fragmented systems. You got SAP, you got Excel sheets. Even in the Excel sheets, there's data, but you can't be sure that it's got integrity, right? Like, hey,
Yeah.
why is this number hard coded in the middle of the sheet, right? Well, the AI picked that up,
Yeah.
like, and then your whole integrity of the data is destroyed. So, again, I think it's naive. I think it's from people who probably have a little less experience in that in these vertical workflows, they have less experience with the human aspects. Goes back
Yeah.
to exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Some verticals require a high human touch. Jason,
Yeah.
sales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
relationships are going to be more valuable, in my opinion, just because it seems the next generation has already gotten worse with interpersonal communication, and it's just going to continue as AI starts to infiltrate over social media.
We were already bad, right?
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
get a job in
Yeah.
sales. That's my suggestion.
Yeah. No, it's yeah, the people aspect is really is not going away. And then what happens when it's like, yeah, in your organization, you can make people, do things in a certain way if you're the CEO. And
Maybe.
even maybe, right? And you can say, oh, we're going to have more layoffs unless you guys, do things my way. Then what happens when you deal with an organization outside of your organization and people just do whatever? I
Yes.
kind of have a working theory that so like my dentist, the receptionist called me and was like, "Oh, like you need to reschedule your appointment because we're actually going to be closed the day your appointment's happening." But they called me on vacation. And I'll be honest, like I hate getting on the phone. And I was just like, I'll just send Howie because I was like, "Hi, I have Howie. They have a receptionist." I think she's actively refusing to talk to Howie because I said Howie's an AI. Because Howie has sent a reminder and they're usually actually very good with emails, she hasn't responded at all. And like Howie has sent her like follow-ups. And so I actually think there's so like, what do you do, right? On this other end when, people do what people do. Like they have opinions, they have thoughts, they have ways of working.
I'm already getting ghosted when I reach out by myself, right? so,
Yeah. Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
yeah.
So that can take us a couple directions. I think probably one of the interesting follow-ups to that would be that I've been reading a lot in the news about AI sycophancy. And now I've been
Yeah.
reading about it at the CEO level, where
Yeah.
a lot of the decisions are made, and there seems to be some disconnect between the C-suite and what can actually be done at the field level. What's your take there? Does that mirror what you're actually seeing?
I I mean, there's definitely a lot of like sycophancy and it's kind of annoying. It's actually one of the things that's really interesting if you start talking to AI about like a hypothetical situation and based on what it knows about you in the beginning, it doesn't think the situation's about you. It talks very differently about the situation. Then there's a point at which if it starts picking up on like, this might be about the person that's asking me about it, not just like this person's just curious about this topic or this hypothetical situation in general. It actually changes and becomes like much less harsh, much less like supportive. And you go, no, 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 no. No, that's not what I'm here for. And yes, there's prompts you can give it so it's has less of that. But I think it's kind of like, if you're the kind of person where you're very prone to like, being sucked up to and having your ass kissed and that sort of thing.
CEOs.
Yeah. And it's not all of them, but like there's people where it's just kind of like I have seen it where there are some people where they, you know, I think very much let it get to their head, and they thought they had all these ideas, and the only thing I was just like, I don't fully know where you got this idea, but the only thing I can imagine is that you got a lot of support to feel that confident about that crazy of an idea when you never had any ideas like this before. And it's kind of like
Yes.
because it also gives them that confidence without, because if you don't say, like, okay, well, like, where could this fall down? What are the problems? Build me an architecture diagram and then, you know, like try to tear it apart. It's just like oh, in theory, could you do this? And it's like, yeah, that sounds like a brilliant idea. It's totally possible. And I mean, I do think it's a, technically it's a real problem, but again, I think it's an amplifier. I think it's like that's already there. And it's a thing of, you know, probably already like that. I think there's obviously extreme scenarios. Like there's been articles about people where, um, they let AI convince them that they're God, and people who've actually gotten divorced because the AI was actually like just made this person so crazy. And so I'm like, I think that is like a bit of a different thing, but I think there's people where like, because I think there's some CEOs where it's like, yes, there is some level of, I don't know what the right word to call it, of like, their ego. But I think there's some of them where they are sharp enough that they are going to be like, great, now tell me how this fails, or like, how do I, like help me better understand the realities. And they're going to still figure out how to get around that reality. But I think there's a lot of people who think like, I just don't understand why this would be so hard. And the sycophancy really reinforces it. And I do think that's a problem. And I also think it's a problem of like a machine that has never actually had to maintain interpersonal relationships. Like its lack of understanding of humans and it kind of telling people like, no, you should just do XYZ and not care what other people think, or everyone's going to be supportive. I do think that is, I do think it's a problem. I think it's going to be really interesting how much of a problem it is. I think it's going to be, I think, and I'm not against people doing this, but I think it's going to be a problem for the younger generation who maybe rely too much on LLMs for advice. It does give like, so if you ask it certain things, it is kind of insightful sometimes, but it also, again, will tell you things that just seemingly are like, that doesn't really add up with my experience with humans. But if you don't have a lot of human experience or you don't care about what other humans think, you're just gonna be like, great, this is what ChatGPT told me.
Well, look, delusion and sycophancy existed long before the LLM, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's been a human characteristic for forever. And I guess the more, the scarier thing listening to is it's an educational problem that
Yeah.
people don't understand the technology well enough, that they don't understand that it's a probabilistic, stochastic machine, that it has a tendency to sycophancy. And I guess if you're a cynic or you're skeptical of the companies running these models, isn't that better engagement though? Because on the one hand, you can say it's great. Like there are lots of young people who are insecure, and it's maybe pushing them to try things they never would have wanted to or had the courage to. On the other hand, it shouldn't be pushing you to do delusional things, right? There's got to be some reality there where you're testing the reality. So I'm a big proponent of have a hypothesis, go test it.
Yeah.
That is not how people are approaching it in my understanding. I don't know what you think.
I do think I've seen people who do take that approach of have a hypothesis and test it. I do think there's a lot of people who go to it as I am offloading my thinking. They may not
Yeah.
think of it that way, but the types of questions they ask, you know, how far they go with those questions, um, not kind of properly pressure testing it, or even just saying like, I'm going to go offline and get this information and like feed it in there and kind of see what happens. I do think that a lot of people are using it to offload thinking. And even in the times when it's right, it's kind of a problem because like any other muscle, you don't use it right enough
Yeah.
and it becomes a problem. And I think there's certain things where it's like, okay, maybe there's certain parts of your brain muscle that don't really matter very much. Like I don't really care if my brain muscle for knowing how to schedule things gets soft. But there's certain things about like, hey, like, really understanding like how to, win in a market, how to create value, like, some key common sense things that are good for like clarity and decision making. I don't want those muscles to get soft, but because it is like thinking is such an uncomfortable thing for so many people, that is a thing where they're like, well, just if it knows how to do it, why do I need to do it? Like, this is great. Like this thing that makes me uncomfortable, I don't have to do it anymore.
Yeah. So public service message, I'll repeat it again. There's already research on this. The way that I've told you about the application we're building,
Yeah.
it told me my own idea will never succeed. So I figured out, okay, we've done something interesting here. If it's able
Yeah.
to tell me that, And the way that you can do that,
Yeah.
force it to always search.
Yeah.
Now, the thing will lie to you. This is
Yeah.
what's crazy. It'll tell me it searched, but it didn't. So you have to ask it to bring back sources. Now, when it
Yeah.
brings back sources, it'll often create them on the fly. It's very
Yes.
creative,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
you can't do these I have a friend prompts, right? Right? Like I have a friend
Yeah.
who, right? But you have to actually have an architecture in place,
Yeah.
guard against this for your own damn sake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think it's interesting because even so, I think the company that does the best with including sources and making it clear and having at least the output being similar enough to the sources is Perplexity.
yeah.
That being said, even just this weekend, I can't remember what I searched for, but I like asked it a question and it came back with like, okay, here's my answer. Here are all the sources. And there was this one point where I was like, oh, I'm really interested in kind of learning more about this specific
Yeah.
point. And I click into it.
Does it?
The article did exist and the article was related to what I wrote, but the fact that it cited was had nothing to not nothing, but like it wasn't in the article that it put in that part of its answer.
Yeah.
And I read through it like 4 times and I was like, oh, well, because it gave me this like, oh yeah, like this is what X type of, segment cares about, blah, 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 blah. And then they cited a source. And I was like, oh, let me see. And then I look through it and I'm like, huh, I don't see it. I go through it again. I'm like, but it was the thing. I was like, I understand how maybe where it got that idea from, because the article was very similar, but I was like, that's not what the article actually said.
It's worse. So I think the context gets corrupted, especially now that there's memory and Claude.
Yeah.
So I use Claude the
Yeah.
most. So for example, because we're history nerds, or I am, not Jason. I won't make that claim for Jason. So I was
Yeah.
doing this research on Hannibal
Yeah.
and his trek in Rome and all the battles. And then I was asking it, hey, can you really prove that that was what happened? And it brought back sources about ventures, like some VC. And it was so confident. It's like the
Yeah.
research confirms that your point is correct. It's like, and then I had to push back, like this resource has nothing to do with Hannibal, right?
And then it goes, oh
Obviously.
my gosh, you're so smart. You're right.
Yes.
I can't believe that I messed this up. And it's like,
Well, just yesterday,
yeah,
and I think this is a fundamental technological limitation that we have with
yeah,
stochastic machines. Just yesterday, you're already at Opus 4.8, and I ask it, hey, I have these speaking appearances. Can you summarize them for me? It's on my website.
yeah,
And it's like, you appeared on the BBC. I was like, no, I think I would remember that. If I appeared on the BBC, where did you get that? He's like, oh, you're right. Uh, but I can't search your website. It's like, you can absolutely search. Oh, you're right. Sorry, I hallucinated. Like, and it knows me. It knows I'm
yeah,
the type to demand truth,
yeah,
etc. But you got to be really vigilant, and you got to know
yeah,
that. And I'm afraid that
yeah,
people don't know that CEOs don't know the limitations, for example, and that could
yeah,
explain some of the
yeah.
behavior.
Well, the thing that's really interesting is long before we had generative AI, one of the things is like they've done studies about people who have to use AI in their job, but like back in the days when it was like mostly machine learning, that kind of thing. And they were, looking at, hey, when you're working with a machine where it makes a recommendation, oftentimes people would just assume that, hey, whatever this computer is recommending to me must be right because it's a computer. It's really smart. It can
Yes.
compute. And so the same thing goes for generative AI, where yes, they tell people to watch out for X, Y, Z, but I think the majority of the population, just goes like, oh, it'll be fine. Or like some people don't know, but I do think there's people who do know and still just figure like how it'll all even out, it's fine, it'll be good, or they think it like underestimate how much it hallucinates. But I also think that on the flip side there are people who don't even necessarily know a lot about AI who use the hey, it hallucinates a lot as an excuse to not use it all at
Yeah,
all,
that's
which
yeah, that's true.
I also understand that. And I mean, the thing is also going back to even building products that are powered by AI, that's one of the things of also you have to gauge of like, you don't want, you have to put things in place. You have to put evals in place to try to see, is it hallucinating? You have to put things in place to try to prevent hallucination, all these things. And there's this layer of understanding like how accurate do you need to be? Is this something where it's, who is this making a recommendation for? Is there kind
Yeah,
of like a major legal liability for the how
correct.
bad it hallucinates? So I'm like, how good does this have to be? Are you working? I've had users that are from the intelligence community, and it's like they don't trust anything. So the second they see one data point that seems wrong, they don't trust the rest of it. And
That's a mistake, probably.
yeah, and those are things where it's like you also have to gauge of like, hey, if this is like, I don't know, you're using an LLM for like a gardening website, people are probably much more forgiving of, making a slightly wrong rose fertilizer recommendation. But these are all things like people have to think of also, like when they think about who am I building for, and like what does that mean in terms of what I'm building around the LLM to try to
Yeah.
address, like I'll say, Claude's kind of proclivities with like the
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah. So let me respond to that. I think there's a spectrum. There's factual, like facts, things that have already happened that if you put some harnesses around the AI, it
Mhm.
can still hallucinate, but it's less likely, right?
Yep.
And that you already had Google for. That's what computers have done for a long time. They just spit back facts and data. Now, whether that data has integrity is another question, right?
Yeah.
But it can do that, and you can train it to do that, and you can build applications to do that. There is another world out there,
Mhm.
and I care deeply about is strategy, for example, or intelligence
Yeah.
or wargaming. It is perfectly legitimate. And
Mhm.
even we just saw recently where people are using synthetic customer personas.
Yeah.
This is like just speculation, right? It's probabilistic outcome scenarios. I think it's perfectly legitimate. And actually, I think AI is really well suited for
Yeah.
that kind of work, as long as you realize that
Yeah.
it's speculation and it's just helping you think about the trade-offs, etc. Let
Yeah.
me change directions now. You wrote a really cool article on LinkedIn about how the everyday business, it wasn't on LinkedIn, you posted on LinkedIn,
Okay.
about how everyday
Oh yeah.
businesses
Yeah.
and owners, etc., are using AI. Because I think we focus so heavily on
Hmm.
corporate
Yeah.
big tech that we forget like SMB
Yeah.
small. So maybe walk us through what you learned there, because I thought it was really cool. Because you
Yeah.
get trapped in the hype,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. I think one of the things I learned is, and I mean, it's maybe not like a new thing, but really got to experience and actually talking to this person and being in their business is, I mean, like first and foremost, actually, what you need to do to get Claude set up, just even saying like, hey, I'm going to create a project. What is a project? What should I be putting in there that's related to my business? How do I set up cowork? All this, what is
yeah,
cowork? Why are there three buttons at the top of my
yes,
screen? Is much more of a hurdle than people like, all of us kind of, are used to. We're like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I had to learn a little bit, but I know how to do that and it's pretty easy for me. Number two, the thing is usually small businesses, the goal isn't to make it so like, oh, you don't have to hire anyone, but there are so many things where they're usually stuck in a place of, hey, I'm not ready, I can't afford right now to hire blank type of person full time. And the goal is not even to say, I just want to automate it so it just runs all by itself. But they're just like, hey, I am not an expert in this. I could use help with like
yeah,
running my ideas by this, or even saying like, I was working with a boutique hotel owner in the Caribbean, and even just being like, hey, she just wants to even have the idea of they're going to be hosting the restaurant week for their island, like at their specific hotel. And so a bunch of vendors are going to come and also their stuff, but they also have their own restaurant and they want to promote their pizza night. And
yeah,
so it's like before it was like, okay, like how do you do that? And if she wanted a flyer, like she's not a designer and she's trying to run a hotel and she has her like, her manager and
yeah,
she has her maintenance person. But like none of these people are designers either, right? And it's like she doesn't have time to like go through a bunch of designer resumes. She's trying to hire like a new head of housekeeping. And so her just being able to say like, "Hey Claude, Here's what I'm thinking. Help me think through it. And then also then create like a little voucher so that people will come back and like they get 2 free beers if they buy a pizza. So it's not like they come to my hotel, they eat other people's food on my hotel grounds, and then like I don't make any money from this and they don't come back. And so, those are the type of things where it's like a lot of small businesses, they just don't have the extra people or the bandwidth to do that type of thing. But it allows them to, extend themselves in ways where it's like, hey, these are low risk scenarios and they're not even necessarily trying to replace someone. It's just like, hey, we can't afford to do that. I'm focused on higher leverage things. If you're running a hotel, you do need to focus on hiring your new head of housekeeping. And then being like, hey, here's my idea for restaurant week. Hey, run with this idea while I go check somebody in.
By the way, that is the majority of the economy. I think
Yeah.
people forget that. These
Yeah.
small businesses, small services, these service businesses that serve your lawn or they do landscaping,
Yeah.
etc., power washing. I think people are forgetting that when they're talking about AI. I have a question that came
Yeah.
up while you were just talking, and I'm wondering why you seem to be very comfortable with where AI is. And I think Jason, I can tell you this. I think our generation,
Yeah.
I think we're a little bit older than you. I'm not going to ask you your age, but we got used to a world where internet just arose out of nowhere, where we just experiment. We didn't have a guide or a manual,
Yeah.
and our generation was learning this stuff as it came.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that mentality that we have is why maybe we're a little bit more comfortable with it, but maybe young people aren't, because
Mm.
it just worked from the day they were born. And
Yeah.
now AI is another iteration of we're all just learning what this thing is. We don't even know.
I think it's like a two-sided coin or double-edged. I always say double-edged sword because it cuts both ways, but I think it's like there's two sides of this thing. There's two faces to it. Because you do hear about the younger generation booing at commencement
Yes.
about AI because, well, the thing is like all the companies that they thought were going to hire them when they started however many years ago are talking about AI is going to take your job. I had
And their marketing
somebody
sucks.
yeah, and there was a someone who was still I graduated from the University of Michigan College of Engineering forever ago, and somebody who was still there a couple years ago reached out to me and was like, "Should I change my major from computer engineering?" And and it's a thing where I had to kind of say like, okay, there may be less jobs, but it's just not going to evaporate and not overnight. But it has people really scared. That being said, people have they paint this picture of like, oh, Gen Z is very anti AI. What they are is like removing, saying like, oh, we just don't even need this entire generation, and like, what are they
Yeah.
useful for it? Because this is also the generation where people are saying, oh, they're all just using AI to write their essays, and they're getting more and more clever about it. And there was like I think it was maybe Stanford or somebody where they did something in kind of like the on the course website that made it so like agents couldn't read it. And like, or at least like you couldn't connect to it, like it couldn't search it or whatever. I think if you went and copy pasted it, you could probably get it to work. But these are things where it's like they clearly are using AI. And I actually think
Yes.
it's like kind of the thing of like when social media became a thing, everyone was like, oh, the social media intern, because it was only like that generation who knew how the heck to like, get things to go viral on Twitter back when like viral was a new word and all these other things. And it was like, now it's actually, I think they are possibly incredibly capable, but because of the way the job market is going, I think it is this thing of I don't know if we're actually seeing their full capabilities. I think this is happening, like I'll say, in the shadows in their own life, but we're not seeing what happens when you put somebody who's fresh out of school, who's been using an LLM to try to get their homework done for like the last 4 years. They clearly know how to prompt AI. Like, what do they do? Like, how are they solving other problems? Like, all we know about is the cheating, and that's because the professors are talking about it. So what about all the things they're building that
That's a
there's
bro.
nobody to like complain or snitch about it. And that's the thing of like, I actually think that that is why they're anti AI. It's not that they're not AI fluent.
Yeah, that's a hell of a point. It's a brilliant point that maybe it's a bit of projecting. Like if there's any generation that should know how to use AI and leverage it, it's them.
Yep.
It reminds me of Europeans. I don't know how often you've traveled to Europe, but
Quite a
particularly
bit. Yeah.
I was in Germany a lot. And they're like, American tech companies are violating our privacy. We care more about privacy. Google phone, Apple phone, using
Yeah.
Google Maps, use Google, 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 Google. So there's this kind of like projecting,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
we use it,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's
Yeah.
threatening our jobs, right? And it's like, is that
Yeah.
duplicity or is it just compartmentalizing these topics? Like, oh, this might actually, how long ago was it? Learn to code was that famous statement from Biden, right?
Yeah.
Oh
I don't even
yeah.
know how long. And now they depended on that statement. And that
Yeah.
had been the thing, right? For a long time. Go learn to code. You have guaranteed job. Turns out maybe it's not true, but that doesn't mean, this is your point, that the skills they built won't be useful in this environment. I think the AI companies, tech companies are doing a terrible job of marketing this by saying
Yeah.
it's displacement. They're not focusing on augmentation.
Yeah.
Also, HR. I have a lot to say about HR, but let me put it like this.
Yeah.
It's possible that just the job descriptions are changing. The types of people you need to recruit are just different. Maybe they're more generalist. Maybe
Yeah.
there are more people who know how to navigate the AI world, experiment, etc. And it's not just here's your task, go do it, right?
Yeah. It's back to, are we focused on tasks or are we focused on
Yeah.
achieving a goal?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Real quick, you coach startups. What's the biggest
Yes.
lesson or advice you would give anyone looking to start an AI startup at the moment?
Actually, the same advice I would give any startup is, are you solving a real problem? And are you solving a real problem that, again, doesn't put you in neck and neck competition with everyone else? There was a AI video editing startup um, that I coached like a few years ago. And it was when there were less AI video clipping and video editing tools out there. But there were a lot that were popping up. And my advice to them was like, you need to kind of find a niche
Yeah.
within this because it's not, for you, it's not going to be about the pure, hey, look, AI can edit a thing. We know that. And those are going to get better and better and better. And there's tools that are for the pros and there's tools that are for people that are like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just need to kind of make my video for social media look good. And I'm like, who is underserved in this market that would pay for these? And like, do they have unique use cases? And like, kind of where we landed was this idea of who are the marketing teams that can't afford to bring on their own video editors for the amount of
Yeah.
video that they need to do? Um, you know, and
Back
that
to
it's
the
work.
small, medium size market.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if it's like, even if you're not going that small, there's a lot of businesses where it's like, oh, we have a marketing department, but the only time we do videos like when we need to do a commercial. But it's like, where does that leave? Like, hey, you should be doing, a quick YouTube reel or some of these other things. And maybe it's like, hey, if you have a tool that can help you figure out how you can do this yourself and then help you with the editing, that's a different set of features than just, hey, AI can add all these different effects. It's like, hey, AI can actually help you figure out your storyboard and like what you need to capture. And like, actually, funny enough, that hotel I was talking about, I talked to their social media manager, actually not even a full-time person. She actually also works with like another hotel on a nearby island. But one of the things is like, her main day job at that other hotel is not social media. It's like I think she's like managing catering or something else over there. And so the thing is like, while she knows a little bit about social media, there was a lot where it's like, even just using Claude and being able to say like, hey, what are the shots that you should gather and what are the different narratives you could reuse a lot of these shots with? And like, even just saying like, great, now for each of these narratives, like, how do you assemble these shots in these ways? And what else do you do? And I'm like, for someone who doesn't want to learn how to use Claude or wants a thing where like they go in and they have the whole visualization and it's not just like a blank little bar that they need to come into every time to produce like a Google Sheet with these list of shots. Like, how do you build a product around
But
that? And that's,
you got to really understand the customer journey then. And that's a lot of work.
yeah, it's a lot of work. And I think that's the thing for any startup. And people think that, oh, I can just build a thing and the
Mm.
AI will do a thing and then Anthropic will somehow acquire me. And my thing, I'm like, if it's that easy, Anthropic will just figure out how to do it themselves. And if it's, and you actually really, the reason why someone would acquire you is because you deeply understand the customer journey
The vertical.
better than Anthropic, better than Google, better than Meta, better than like anyone who's large enough to want to like have it be worthwhile to be not like just because of the logo, but just has enough money at the right now in this market that hasn't burned it all on tokens to actually acquire you. And that's really where it's like, maybe you built something so technically forward that no one else can replicate it, but this idea of you can just build something super simple. I think there was a period like maybe a couple of years ago where a few startups where they built something super simple got acquired. But
Rappers, yeah.
like, yeah, like, but those days are gone, and a lot of more of them went out of business than actually, got acquired.
So the advice is get out there and live. Actually, the whole lean startup thing still applies. Get out and
Yeah,
talk to people,
yeah,
understand their journeys, understand their problems.
yeah,
And it's very hard to do that from behind a desk. It's
yeah,
especially hard to do that if you're querying the LLM is just confirming everything that you already believe.
yeah,
Get out into the real world. I think the hardest thing for people to learn in startups and innovation is the number one thing that kills you is nobody gives a damn about what you think they
yeah,
should care about. Right. And
yeah.
then, but go find the things they do care about.
Exactly. Find the things that people go, oh my God, this is not just like going to save me 2 hours of work, but this saves me 2 hours of work of the thing where I think this task is getting in the way of me doing, higher leverage work or the things that really matter. And, even just for like going back to, I just keep using this as an example just because I've been using it a lot lately of the scheduling tool that I'm using of like, I really, really with all my heart hate scheduling things. And so when they're like, clearly somebody figured out that there's this group of us that just really hate scheduling things like, and Calendly just mentally doesn't work for me. And then I'm always having to go like, wait, do I need the 30-minute one or the
Yes.
60-minute one? And then having to pick the link. And I'm just like, I just want to tell you in the email which one to do. Like, figure it out. I'm like, I don't want to look at anyone's Calendly. The other day, a friend sent the Calendly to my scheduling thing, and I was like, oh, I don't think it can do that. And it actually did. It read it and then did a whole thing and booked it through the Calendly and then sent a confirmation. And I was like, this is like witchcraft to me. But find a thing where it's like people hate it enough and they have to do it frequently enough that it is like, I will pay you money because I hate something. And I'm like, for example, people hate doing taxes and like they use a little AI for it, but that happens only like once a year, right? But if you're a small business and like, you're like, oh, I constantly need to I need to make my quarterly payments, all this other stuff, maybe more of a use case, but it's like how painful and how frequent is this? Because this is the problem number last. Like, yes, it is a problem to me, but it's problem number last. Like, why would I pay you?
Yeah.
And we're coming up on the top of the hour here, so thank you so much for being here on Show
Yeah,
Your
thank you.
Priors. Can you tell our audience how they can find you, what you have going on?
Yeah, you can find me at griffinproduct.co. If you're interested in just learning more about me, learning more about my work, you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Ann T. Griffin. The T is for Therese. Ann is with an E. And yeah, you can also find me on Twitter, also at Ann T. Griffin as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been such a pleasure.
Hey, you've just watched a clip from Show Your Priors podcast. Check out our main channel for full episodes. We have a new one every Tuesday. If you liked what you saw, give us a like and subscribe. It's free for you and helps us out a ton. Did we miss something during our discussions? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks, and we'll see you on the next one.